guys, I'm here today to talk about the books I read in the month of April. I haven't filmed in quite a few weeks, so I might be a bit awkward. One thing I want to mention is there is a sort of storm situation outside. I mean, storm's probably an exaggeration, but it goes from being really freaking dark and windy and torrential rain to really sunny and no rain, still wind. So the lighting may change quite dramatically, but you know, atmosphere. So I read 14 books in the month of April, and I was actually studying for my OWLs, and I managed 11 out of 12 subjects, which I'm very pleased with. I was trying to do it in a way where I didn't read any books I didn't actually want to read. So I didn't get my OWL in potions because I just didn't feel like reading a sequel. I had loads, I didn't feel like reading them. So yeah, I think 11 out of 12 is pretty good, and it means that my career path is still very open for my NEWTs in, I think, August. So there's that. So I'm going to try and be quick because there's quite a few books to get through. The first one I am going to talk about in another video. So this is a sort of nature writing memoir, and I have plans to read. This has inspired me to read more of those that I own, and so I'm hoping to read a couple more and then talk about them all in a video together at some point this month. So this is Waterfalls of Stars, My 10 Years on the Island of Skoma by Rosanne Alexander. So I was buddy reading this with Charlotte from Tired Mama Tries to Read. We both said it's a book we'd had on our shelves for quite a while, and it was nice to finally have a prompt to pick it up because the font's very small and a little bit intimidating. So I'm going to link a video that Charlotte did up here. If you're not subscribed, you should be. Her channel is absolutely amazing. She's so warm. I love the way she talks about books, and I see no reason why everybody is not subscribed to her. So go watch that video. And Charlotte said this is her book of the year. It's quite early to call that, but she just loved it so much. So I really enjoyed this. I didn't love it as much as Charlotte did, and I think I'll talk about that more, as I said, in another video. So briefly, what this book is about is the author in the 70s, when she was in her early 20s, she and her partner applied for a job on a small island off the coast of Wales to be the reserve wardens. In order to take that job, they had to be married. They got offered the job, they got married incredibly quickly and moved to the island. And there was no electricity, everything was on oil heaters and oil lamps. Obviously there was no internet or mobile phones at the time, and they were very much dictated to by the weather. So they ran out of, their food supplies ran low a lot, and it was difficult to grow fresh fruit and veg there because of the weather and the wildlife. And it's about them living there and the nature they protect and observe, and also what it is like to live in such a remote location. In the summer, visitors come, but for many months in the winter they don't see many other people at all for a really long time. And it's about the author's love for the island, deep connection with the island, but also with her love for living an isolated life, something that she feared to begin with and most people would find a scary thing. She grows to love. So the vast majority of this book I think is spectacular, beautifully written. If you're at all interested, I would pick it up. And I cheated a little bit because I only actually finished the last 30 pages today. I hadn't picked it up since like Monday, so shouldn't really count this for my astronomy OWL, but I'm not above cheating, so there's that one. Then I have a few, I guess, like quicker reads. This is And the Ocean Was Our Sky by Patrick Ness, illustrated by Ravina Kai. This came out like early last year maybe, and I picked it up because it was pretty. So this is a retelling of Moby Dick from the point of view of the whales, and it's a bit more than a retelling, I guess, because it sort of flips Moby Dick, and it becomes a bit like mythology based, I guess. And Moby Dick is like this sort of devil-like creature in the human world, but all the humans are scared of Moby Dick as well. It's a bit weird. So it's beautifully illustrated because the way they've decided to do this, the story, is that the whales believe that they're not swimming upside down, and they believe when they come to the surface, that's when they're swimming upside down. So they think that the world we live in is upside down. So yeah, it's really beautiful, and it can get a bit gory at points. Can't find any of those pages, but yeah, as you can see on the cover, red is the colour that's used throughout. So I enjoyed this. It was a pleasant read. I don't think it's anything amazing. I guess fairly forgettable. This is the sort of book it's nice to get out from the library to experience the nice artwork and the sort of twist, but it's nothing like super memorable. and it's nothing that I'm desperate to hold on to. So there's that one. And then I read a couple of comic books. So firstly we have Moonstruck Volume 1 by Grace, Ellis and Shae Beagle. This volume is called Magic to Brew. I didn't enjoy this. I think, do you know what? I consistently try over the years to pick up comic books like this that come in volumes, and they don't work for me. I liked Saga for a period, and then I felt that Saga got a bit too action-packed, and other than that I haven't really found any that I like. I like standalone graphic novels which are slow, really character driven, and usually memoirs, and I find these sort of things are just way too there's not enough character development, they're too action-packed, they're just not aimed at, I'm not the right reader for them, and I found this was a perfect example of that. So it's really cutesy, the colours are lovely, it's got some nice fun ideas, so it's set in a world just like our own, but in which magical creatures, you know, coexist with humans. So there's like werewolves and vampires and centaurs, and this is about two werewolf girls or young women who meet one another and start dating, and then they go to a sort of magical mystery night with one of their friends who's a centaur, and some baddie turns the centaur into a human, and it's about them trying to get the centaur's like correct bottom half back. I just found it got a little bit silly. I also found it was one of those graphic novels, and I find this quite often with these sort of comics, where I turn the page and I'd think a couple of panels must have been missed because I don't know how we got from here to here. It makes no logical sense. I found that some of the characters, I'd be confused and be like, is that person? Because they look like they're drawn differently in this bit to how they were in another bit. And I know in some comics like this the illustrator changes. I don't think this is the case for that. I think there was just some inconsistencies. So I really didn't enjoy this, but I think in large part it's because I'm not the right reader. So there's that one. I enjoyed this one a little bit more. This is a standalone. This is Bingo Love by T. Franklin, Jenn St-Onge and Rosanne, and this opens with an elderly lady talking to a young woman, relaying a sort of grand romance she had over many, well, sort of interrupted over many years, I guess. When she was very young, she met a young girl at bingo in, I guess, oh God, I can't even remember when they'd met, in 1963. And they broke up because of their families not agreeing with them being in love as two women. And they went and led their separate lives, and then they meet again many years later when they're sort of in, I guess, late middle age, and start a new life together, and you follow their story. So yeah, and it follows, I guess, their families and how they deal with it. This is nice. It's a nice, enjoyable, quick read. There were some points where I was like, oh, that's nice, that's well done, that's quite funny or quite touching. But again, I don't think anything like this can be done in a really impactful or emotive way, because it's just too shallow of a form for me to deliver that. And again, I just think I'm the wrong sort of reader. And there's a weird thing that happens at the end to do with like futuristic stuff that I felt was a bit out of place. So yeah, this was okay. I think I'll find it quite forgettable. But if you like these sort of comics, then, you know, and it sounds like the sort of thing for you, you probably will really enjoy it. I just, yeah, these things are always way too quick for me to feel connected. So there's those. The next two I'm going to talk about were on the Women's Prize long list when I read them, and are now on the Women's Prize shortlist. So this is Ordinary People by Diana Evans. I feel really conflicted about this book. I'm not going to talk about what these two books are about because you probably know already. I read this one very quickly in like 2 days after work. I don't usually read a lot in the evenings after work, but I really sped through this and I didn't expect to. I know lots of people have said they struggled with this one and put it down a lot, and I didn't feel that way at all. It is pretty bleak, but at the same time it's not one of those bleak books that I found made me feel low while reading it, but I guess that's different for everybody. So on the one hand, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed her writing style. I found it really readable. On the other hand, there were certain things about her writing style I found a bit annoying and jarring, I guess. So she's one of those authors who uses lists to describe landscapes. So this is set in London, and when she describes an area of London, you get like a page-long list of all the things you can see if you were there. And you know, she does it a lot, so you do get to the point where you're like, yep, I know you like lists. So that can be a little bit tedious. And also I guess I felt like the two female characters as individuals were great, but when viewed together it was a bit frustrating because I felt they were the exact opposites of one another in a bit of a cliched way. So one of them wanted nothing more than to be a wife, a homemaker and a mother, and the other wanted the opposite and felt trapped by those same things, and I felt it was just a bit too convenient. And I also felt like you're told this is a novel about two couples and really it's a novel about one couple, and the other couple surface every now and again, and I don't think they were any less interesting, they were just given less pages. There's also a theme in this novel about a ghost, and that storyline gets stronger as you go through, and I don't think that needed to be there. So yeah, I sped through it, but I can't really say what I really enjoyed about it, which is an odd feeling. So I'd definitely pick up another one of her books because obviously I enjoyed it. And you know, I guess out of the ones I've read, I probably would have put it on the short list, but there's quite a few I never got around to reading, so there's that one. And then the next one is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. I listened to this one on audiobook. I'd highly recommend the audiobook route. The audiobook narrators were amazing. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was great. I thought it would be an excellent book club read because it brought up so many points of discussion. And what I really enjoyed about it was that, so this is written in letters between a husband and wife. I'm sure you know already, the husband is sent to prison for a crime he didn't commit, and they are writing letters to one another. In the sort of background of this novel is the fact that they're an African-American couple, and there's a class divide between their two families, and that's an interesting commentary throughout. And I guess when this novel first came out, a lot of people thought it would be a real commentary on the unfair justice system that has an extreme prejudice against African Americans. And it isn't really. That's always part of the story, but what the main focus is these two people and what it does to their marriage. And I thought it was done brilliantly. They wrote letters to one another, and sometimes I'd read his letter and be like, he is so right, she's so out of order, he has every right to be angry, oh my god, she's got so much to answer for. And then I'd read her response and I'd be like, oh, no she's not, like she's completely within her rights, he's a dickhead, I feel awful for having sided with him. And that would go on, and I think what this novel shows is the complexity of people, and also how you put decent people in a difficult situation and the results can go in every different direction, and it doesn't mean they're bad people. So I really enjoyed it. I know a criticism I've heard quite a lot is that there's a third narrator who comes into the book a bit later in, and a lot of people said they felt he was an unnecessary addition. I disagree, because I found the whole point in the novel was commenting on things that would appear like bad choices to other people, things that other people would go, oh my god, I can't believe they did that. And some of the things that he does in the novel would be viewed in that light, and I felt without giving him the voice, you give him a disservice, because you've allowed the other two to have their voice. So I felt like he equally should have had his voice, so I liked his inclusion. So I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to look into her other novels, and I'll definitely follow her as an author in the future. The next book I haven't got much to say about. This is Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin. This was translated by Megan McDowell. I read this in about an hour. It's a little weird and wacky novella. I'm not going to say much because this is an easy one to spoil. Just not for me. I think this is accomplishing what it's trying to do, but I didn't ever connect to the writing style, and I felt really held at a distance from the characters. I understood the political and environmental points this book was trying to make, but I was never quite sure whether the author wanted you to be enraged by that or to instead believe in some sort of mystical element. So yeah, this one left me feeling a bit cold, sadly. Then the next one I really enjoyed is Doreen by Barbara Noble. As you can see, this is a Persephone book, and it has glorious bright end papers. So I haven't read a Persephone book in quite a few years, and I don't know why, because they're great. Also, Luna is snoring, so apologies if you can hear that. So this Persephone book is one of the lesser known ones, and it's one I always wanted to read because I love narratives about young girls, and this follows a young girl called Doreen when she is evacuated to Oxfordshire during the Blitz. So her mother has decided to keep her in London when all the other children are being evacuated, and then she decides that maybe it's the wrong choice, and so she sends Doreen to a couple, a middle-class couple, who have been unable to have children themselves. And this book is really a commentary on the notion of evacuation and what it does to a family. So this book opens with a brilliant essay which gives you the context for this. It tells you why evacuation was considered in Britain, who made those decisions, who sat on the boards of those committees and signed the bills, and what their reasons were, and then the sort of catastrophic fallout of those decisions. So no surprise, lots of middle-class white men sat on the board. In fact, the whole board was middle-class white men, and they only considered the child's physical safety, of they should not be in a place that's being bombed, which makes sense, but they didn't weigh that up against the long-term emotional impact this would have on parents and children. And this novel examines that in a brilliant way, because it doesn't choose to follow a child who is mistreated by the people they've been evacuated to, which did happen, but it doesn't choose to follow that. It chooses to follow a child who falls in love with the people she's been sent to, and they fall in love with her. All their lives are better for knowing one another. And it's a great book because you feel really conflicted, because you feel so deeply for Doreen's mother, because she is, they're from a working class family, she's a single mother, she's a cleaner, they live in a very small flat in a very rundown part of London, and she's sent to this luxurious life where she goes to a much better school, she has much better opportunities, and her mother wants her to be safe but doesn't want Doreen to love someone more than she loves her. It's a beautiful novel to watch unfold, and I felt really conflicted because the couple she sent to think they're doing everything to be nice to her, and every now and again they consider whether what they're doing is unfair to her mother, and they always sort of convince themselves it isn't because it's more convenient for them to believe that. For example, they begin to correct Doreen's accent because they think that to speak the Queen's English rather than her heavy London accent that she speaks will be much better for her in the future, so she'll have a much better education and she'll sound just in general much less common. And what they don't realise about this is, of course, when her mother meets Doreen again, she feels less than, she feels diminished, and she feels that she doesn't recognise her own child. So it's things like that, these small moments, that I thought were handled really well. So this isn't, you know, a blow your mind novel, it's very quiet, but if you like Persephone books, Virago books, those sort of things, I think this one is worth giving a go. This next one I think I'll talk about in another video as well. This is The Migration by Helen Marshall. This is set in, I guess, like a near future, and this is set, I think, in Oxford as well. Yes, it is. So we follow a teenage girl who's in like about 16, 17, and they're from Canada, and her mother and her sister have moved to Oxford to live with their aunt because her sister has come down with a condition which is spreading around the world, in which young children start to get really ill and then lots of them die. So they've moved to Oxford because there's much better medical research happening there, and they're hoping she'll be, you know, there for the cure, basically. And I don't really want to say any more than that because you get told more than that on the back, but I think it's best not to know because it happens a bit further in. So the whole premise of this is that this condition affects the mind of the people who suffer with it, which really affects the course of the novel. And also there's lots of research being done by the main character's aunt to suggest that this illness could somehow be linked to the Black Death. And I found that bit fascinating. So they're looking back through the historical records to see whether this could be something that existed previously, and whether we can learn anything from history in order to find the cure. And so I really enjoyed that. This book, I felt, wasn't as strong as I hoped it could be. So this is probably like a 3-star read for me. I'd read more by this author, but I felt that the first half was much stronger than the second. And I felt a tiny little bit like I don't know, it was a tad more, like, I don't know how to word it, because now I feel like that's a spoiler, so I'm not going to be able to say it. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. It's not amazing, but I'd read more by this author, and she actually has a short story collection out that I really want to pick up, so I'll be giving that a go. Then the next one is Black Car Burning by Helen Mort. It's just started absolutely tipping it down, so you might be able to hear that on my window. So this is a recent release, and I thought this may be one of my books of the year. And when I started reading it for about half of the book, I was convinced because I was loving it. So this is set in and around Sheffield in contemporary times. Sheffield is a city in the north of England, and it follows several working class characters as they all navigate quite lonely lives. We follow a young policewoman, we follow her partner who is obsessed with extreme climbing, and they live together in a polyamorous relationship with 2 men. And we also follow a woman who works at the local sort of climbing shop, and she becomes slightly obsessed with the woman who climbs. And then we also follow a slightly older man who was a policeman during the time of the Hillsborough disaster, and this book is set during the time of the Hillsborough inquest, and he has become obsessed by researching the day and the inquest. And we follow these people as they, like, I guess, move around Sheffield and one another. What I loved about this book is between each chapter there is a sort of 1-page description of a location in and around Sheffield, usually a sort of a rural location, every now and again an urban one. And the location is talking in first person, like it has a voice. It's like poetry, it's spectacularly beautiful. She's a poet, and you can tell that from those sections. So yeah, I loved what it said about a place that isn't London. So many of the books that are published in this country are set in London. It's the first book I've ever read that's set in Sheffield. I'm sure there are others, but not enough. So I loved that. I loved that it spoke about different types of relationships that we don't tend to read in fiction that are also not published enough. I loved all the nature writing. I loved that all the characters are working class. What I didn't love, and the reason this isn't one of my books of the year, is that I felt like she just didn't pull all those things together well at the end. You feel like you're building and building, and then all that tension that's been building, all these themes that have pulled together and that you think are going to result in, I don't want a massive plot twist or spectacular explosion, but you know, you want it to go somewhere. I felt like instead all those things dissipated, and by the end it was a weaker book than it had been at the start. So I still recommend it. This is her debut novel. I'd read anything she wrote in the future, and I will seek out her poetry, but I just didn't love the way this was pulled together at the end. So there's that one. Then next I reread The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I read this about 8 years ago, and I listened to it on audiobook. It's narrated by Dominic West, which is sort of what enticed me into this being my reread in April. He's a fantastic narrator, and particularly really good at this voice. So if you haven't read this book before, it's set in 1956, and it's told from the perspective of Stevens, who is an ageing butler, and he is now working in a house which was once you know, one of the most famous houses in England, think like Downton Abbey level, and now has been sold to an American who's lived there for 3 years, and nearly all the rooms are you know, sheeted over and locked, and they only have a couple of house staff left, when they used to have, like, you know, a ridiculous amount of people working there, and just dinners and parties all the time. And he is reminiscing about a relationship he had or never had with the head housekeeper at the time, and also reminiscing about the part he played in the sort of political leanings of Lord Darlington, who was his employer for many years. Stevens just doesn't get involved in anything. Basically, he thinks his duty is to serve, not to comment. If someone who is better than him, more wealthy than him, more lordly than him is doing something, it must therefore be right. And so he just doesn't comment. This book is not plot driven, it's incredibly slow. What is amazing about it is that, I don't know how to describe this book. He spends so much time thinking about what it is to be a gentleman, what it is to be the perfect butler, and he repeats things again and again, but it doesn't take away from the novel, it adds to it, because what you see is this man has lived this whole life and these are the things he still clings to, these things that are irrelevant when he hasn't got any meaningful relationships in his life. There's so many points in the novel where he should have an emotional reaction and he doesn't, and it's desperately sad. Like, you feel so much for him and so much for the people who are affected by his lack of connection. I think this is a really powerful book, and really, I don't know how to describe it, just really, this is one of those novels that is acutely observed and realised. Like, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing extra, there's no, it's just really well done. So I definitely recommend this one. And then the last three I'm barely going to talk about because I'm going to actually do a wrap-up video of all the YA I've been reading recently and enjoying, surprise of all surprises. So I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth, and We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. I have fluff on the end of my nose again. So I really enjoyed all three of those, and I'm going to talk about them in a video very soon, so this video is long enough as it is. So yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were. I'd love to hear down below, and also feel free to recommend me any other books based on the books I enjoyed in this video or spoke about in this video, and also let me know what your favourite read of April was. Thanks for watching. Bye.